so we're going to kick it off. So first up, thank you to our sponsors. So Skybait and Game will pay for the pizza that will be arriving in the break. Brunwood, who provided us the venue for free, which is fantastic. So thank you very much to them. And JetBrains have provided us with some codes to give away for products. The prize draw will be in a bit. There's one I forgot to add to that, which is the JS Nation conference. They also gave us a ticket to give away. That will also be one of the prize draws. Please follow us on social media, on Twitter basically. Don't join our meetup page because we're going to stop using it. We are running on YouTube hopefully, if everything doesn't crash. We only have one of our streamers this time, but hopefully it all still goes well. So if you want to look back on any of the talks, go to our YouTube page, youtube.com/LeedsJS, and they should all be up there. There are stickers and badges and stuff on the table at the back. I saw Jamie brought some stuff for Sanity, which is what he's going to be talking about in a bit. And we don't do Q&A. Please come up and speak to the speakers after their talks if you've got any questions or if you want to chat with them. This isn't clicking. There we go. So we do have a code of conduct. If you want to read the full version, you can go to leedsjs.com/code of conduct. I'm going to read out a shorter version. So, LeedsJS is dedicated to providing harassment-free meetup experiences for everyone, regardless of gender, sexual orientation, disability, physical appearance, body size, race, religion, or age. We do not tolerate harassment of meetup participants in any form. Sexual language and imagery is not appropriate for any meetup venue or online discussion, including talks given at the event. LeedsJS members violating these rules may be sanctioned or expelled from the group at the discretion of the group's organisers. And then we have our prize draws, which was a really bad segue. So if you want to enter the one to get the JetBrains code, which I forgot to tag, saying it's for the JetBrains code, it's just tinyurl.com/LeedsJS April 2019, or if you tweet with the hashtag LeedsJS. That's 2 prize draws, so you could enter both. In fact, you can enter the Twitter one as many times as you like. I don't discriminate on that one. If you try and enter the form one multiple times, I'll delete your name. And the JS Nation ticket. So JS Nation is a conference that's in Amsterdam. It's about JavaScript. It's a single day. It's on the 7th of June 2019. I believe it's a 2-track conference, but they've given us a ticket to go away. So if you want to get that ticket, go to tinyurl.com/JSNationLeedsJS 2019. Stick your name in, and then if you win, I'll take your name and email and get everything across to you for that. So I said that we're not going to be using Meetup anymore. It costs a lot of money, and we're web developers, so have a website instead. Part of that, we have a mailing list. If you want to carry on knowing about LeedsJS, please sign up to the mailing list. You won't really find out much otherwise, except through Twitter. We also have a Slack channel that I forgot to put into this. You can sign up to our Slack channel and learn about things through that as well. The Slack is also on leedsjs.com, it's just in the header. And jobs. Does anyone have any jobs they want to shout out? New.
I actually feel like a full-time recruiter, so sorry about this. Does anyone we're still hiring JavaScript engineers and QA engineers? Great stack, great people. You know where we are. Thank you.
Anyone else? No? Okay, cool. That was nice and quick. So first up, we have Jamie Bradley. This is the second time Jamie's come up. He spoke last time in January, I believe, which really wasn't that far away. Jamie's a web developer. He runs Endeavour Digital in Middlesbrough, which is an agency. He also runs Middlesbrough Front End, which is an event that's happening tomorrow, and I'm going up to speak at. And Jamie's going to be giving a talk called Finding My Sanity, which is about the JAMstack and a Headless CMS called Sanity. So if Jamie can come up, and we'll get everything swapped over and get things kicked off.
Hello. Working?
It's good.
Is it coming through here though?
10 issues. Oh, there we go. That's right, speaking.
Yeah. Ooh. Cool.
I got sent down.
Nice. Okay. So let's see how we get on. Right. So just a couple of little caveats before we start. I've got man flu, or flu, and I'm probably going to cough. So I'll try my best to, I don't know, cover the microphone or something. And towards the end of this, there's going to be a demo, and I'm at the mercy of the demo gods, so we'll have to see how we get on there. But as nerves are kicking in, Luke mentioned, I run a company called Endeavour Digital, and Endeavour Digital was formed in February 2017. We're a web-based digital agency, and we basically focus on front-end development solutions, mainly with JavaScript and React, and more recently JAMstack. We moved into a building called Boho 5 in February last year, after I spent a year and a bit of contracting, and we now have our first employee. So we're getting there slowly, but we've had the pleasure of working with some really, really good clients. So if you want to find out a little bit more, then give us a shout afterwards. And I also run Middlesbrough Front End. So is anyone familiar with this picture here? Yeah, what is it? It is a Palmo, absolutely. So we don't actually dish out Palmos at the meetup, I'm afraid, but there are some really nice Palmo houses nearby. So our next event's tomorrow. If you fancy your last minute trip over to Middlesbrough, then give us a shout, or if you find us on Middlesbrough FE on Twitter, we'll take you through to the ticket site. So all of the marketing spiel out of the way now. Last time I came to LeedsJS, I did a talk called What the JAMstack, and I basically did a talk about JAMstack, explain what it was, and why it's something that why we should consider using it. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to, for the benefits of those who aren't familiar with JAMstack, I'm just going to quickly run through a couple of previous slides that I've done, and then it will all tie together with how Sanity fits in. So before we move on, it's probably fair to say that websites now are moving away from this monolithic approach. We're starting to see a lot of static sites and a lot of sites that are JavaScript based, or acquiring dynamic data via APIs. So we don't really need to use this term static websites anymore, because when I think of static websites, I think back to like 8 years ago when we had standard little brochure sites that didn't really do anything. They were quite boring. There was no moving parts. If you actually Google static, you actually get this horrific definition of lacking in movement, action or change, especially in an undesirable or uninteresting way. It's not really a way to sell a website, really. So I don't think we have this term static website isn't really a thing anymore because of all of the different things that we have going on. And that's when the guys over at Netlify came along and coined the term JAMstack. So I hope you can see that. I put my iPad Pro to use and thought I'd draw this. Well, basically, Jam in JAMstack means JavaScript, APIs, and markup. And building a website with the JAMstack architecture is going to give us 3 benefits: speed, security, and scalability. And I'll run into that briefly shortly. So really, what it is, it's a static website architecture, basically. It's a collection of standards that have been defined to say, this is how we should build static websites. It doesn't dictate what technologies you use, so it's not slamming a JavaScript framework at you. It doesn't tell you what backend systems to use for acquiring content and things. It's just purely a collection of guidelines and practices. Now, if you're not familiar with Netlify, they're probably worth having a look at. Netlify.com. They're a hosting company that basically built their entire product around this. As I said, that those are the guys that coined the term JAMstack. So, is anyone here familiar with the term Headless CMS? Yeah, a couple. So, Headless CMS is basically a content management system that has no view layer. It's not like a traditional WordPress build where you basically set up your data in the background and then you have a theme or a theme that's closely related to the overall application. It means that you can build the front end aspect of your website or your content managed website with whatever you want. And this is really good for us because it means that we have a lot more flexibility, and this is great in the world that we are in today, where we have tons of different medias that we need to accommodate for. We're not just thinking about websites anymore. We've got TV apps, we've got mobile apps, like game consoles, billboards, you name it, and whatever else comes next. We can basically have a single source of truth for our data and then distribute it out to these different devices, I suppose. Now, there's tons of different headless content management solutions. I've basically named a couple here, but in no particular order. I'm just going to grab a couple. There's the likes of Sanity, Prismic. WordPress can be converted into a headless CMS through its API. Contentful, Craft CMS, Content Stack. The list goes on. There's quite a lot of them, to be honest. And there's a website which I did share in the previous LeedsJS talk, which is headlesscms.org. And this is a great site. It's basically a huge directory that lets you filter different content management systems or headless content management systems by their type. So you can have a flat file content management system or an API driven content management system, and you can also sort the results by stars so you can see which is popular, which is really good if you're looking to invest into a headless CMS solution, so you can see which one's going to be around. So yeah, headlesscms.org if you've not seen that before. So in my previous talk at LeedsJS, I did a whole thing about different examples of JAMstack websites, but I've just taken a really, really basic instance now and I can go through it. So here we have it looks terrible on here, really rough diagram. Now the idea behind a JAMstack website is that any data that you need to acquire from like a headless CMS, if we stick with that theme, is actually done during a build. It's not acquired as part of the request when the user goes to visit your website. It's not dealt with at runtime. So what we could have inside of this blue box is something like Gatsby or any other static site generator that can acquire content for us. And if we imagine that this blue box is a service like Netlify, what we can do is we can tell Netlify to point to our Git repository or our headless content management solution, and via webhooks we can instruct a deployment. So what this means is that if a content editor signs into Sanity, for example, and makes a change, that then sends the instruction to Netlify, deployment takes place, and then the user is only going to get the new content as the deployment's finished. There's definitely trade-offs with this approach. If you're working on a website that requires a lot of updates, so something like a huge editorial website, this could be quite challenging. But there are certainly performance benefits with this because none of that process is taking place at runtime. So I don't want to go too deep into JAMstack because I've already done it. So if you want to find out more about it, then give it a Google, check it out. It's really cool. So about 4 months ago, I was approached by one of our clients, and they basically asked for a new WordPress website, and this felt like a great opportunity to give this JAMstack thing a go. I looked into it, looked into Gatsby, and found that there's a really good plugin called Gatsby Source Plugin. And what this means is that it means that we can acquire data from WordPress via the WordPress API, and we can set up that architecture that we talked about. And to start with, the results were really, really good. The build times were pretty cool. It was really nice working in a React-based environment, working with Gatsby. The community behind Gatsby are really good. You can get some really good support on there. And yeah, it was really nice. However, WordPress proposed a few challenges to us. Now, the next few slides are basically some gotchas that I experienced with WordPress. Please don't take this as a stab towards Gatsby or anything like that, because that's not what it's meant to be. It's just meant to be either a cry for help, so you can tell me how to fix it, or a bit of a heads up for you guys so that you're aware of it. the biggest problem that we found when using WordPress with Gatsby was GitHub issue 6554. This isn't the actual title, but I've called it the source and transform nodes issue. Now, another caveat, the following is a screen recording that I stupidly decided to record on a 5K iMac, so we'll see how this goes. Oh, it looks alright. So what's going to happen is we're going to run Gatsby develop, which is the command that we use to work locally, and this basically is reproducing the process that takes place on Netlify. It's fetched all of the data we need from WordPress, and this source and transform nodes process is basically getting all of the data for us and putting it in a position where we need it, so that when we do GraphQL queries, we can get the data and merge them into the templates. But what you'll see here is that it's stuck at this point, and for some reason the plugin seems to have a hard time acquiring images at certain points, and it just basically stops and keeps going and keeps going. And people have raised issues on this GitHub issue where they've been saying that their builds have been, sat there idle for a good 24 hours in some instances. It's quite big. The issue last time I checked was still open, and it's been open since July 2018, so it's clearly a stinker. But what was interesting is that this person here who's raised the issue has said that it happens on a large WordPress installation, so they're saying they're using around 9,000 posts, 35 pages. They've not mentioned images, but our website only had 80 images and 100 posts, which I think is quite small, and we still had a problem. However, we did come across a workaround somewhere down at the very bottom of this issue, which is to use a fork of that plugin, which feels a bit it's a bit nervy, but I'm sure the guys over at Gatsby are working really hard to come up with a solution. I would love to offer some help, but I have no idea where to start. So if anyone in here has experienced this issue and would like to speak to me after over a coffee, that would be lovely. So there were some other challenges that we had, and it was just general WordPress challenges. The biggest one that we had, I wasn't going to go through all of them, but the biggest one was this scenario that the client gave to us, which was that, so basically the client's a solicitor, and let's assume that the company want to publish an article about buying a house in 2019. Now, what happens is, our solicitor Dave doesn't really know anything about WordPress. He doesn't want anything to do with that. He wants to leave it to the content writer Sam. And what happens is internally between them, they're sending a Word document between them, knocking a draft up, and then once it's done, Sam, the content writer, is going to publish that to WordPress. Now, rightly so, Sam's logged in as the author, or as the user, sorry, and WordPress will recognise Sam as the author out of the box. But what the client actually wants to happen is that they want this document, or this post, sorry, to be associated with Dave the solicitor. So really what we needed was the author image. This is where the difficulty came from, because in the background we've created a set of custom post types for staff members where we publish the name and the images and stuff, and we needed to bring that into the post. So we are using advanced custom fields as part of the build, and the first thing I thought was, no bother, we're going to just use the relationship field, we'll be able to get that. However, these are the only available fields to us from our author, so this is basically the related author to the post. It gets everything we need, apart from the image, which was a bit of a problem. So the way to do it is to do some filtering on the client side, basically within the template itself in the JavaScript. I was kind of hoping that we might be able to get something from the actual GraphQL query. Again, if someone sat here thinking you're a bit silly there, then just give us a shout. I'm all up for that. No hot reloading after data changes, which makes sense, right? Because the whole concept behind the workflow, if you will, is that when you change data on the back end, you need to trigger another build. So if we were thinking about it on the live site, Netlify would do the build process and distribute it to a CDN. So this meant that when working locally and working on a local instance of WordPress, we had to stop the Gatsby server, start it again, fetch all the data, stop it, start it again. And we were having some trouble with our WordPress local machine where it was actually really slow on API calls, which we finally managed to get around with a little bit of tinkering, but that was quite problematic. And finally, my PHP is not fantastic. I'm more of a JavaScript developer. What I really want is an all-in-one Vue.js React-based solution. So after experiencing this trouble with this project, I thought I can't really go with that again. I'd like to find something else. So I had looked through the Headless CMS website, had looked through Twitter, and came across Sanity. And I've actually found Sanity really, really good to use. The example that I'm going to show you today is our work in progress website for Endeavour Digital. I say work in progress because it should really take like a week of time to do it, but we've been spending about 8 months on it, just because we don't have the time. But this was I thought after the carry on that we had with WordPress, it would probably make sense to try and use something that we own to learn the mistakes from rather than the client. So some of the things that Sanity is going to give us, the documentation is fantastic. There's some information inside of the documentation that you can actually take away and apply to other systems, especially if you're not necessarily a strong API developer like me. The community is really good. The guys sent out some swag for the meetup without any hesitation. There's a Slack channel where everyone's really helpful. They basically allocate like staff members from Sanity to answer some of the questions on the channels. There's a good set of plugins. Portable text. So this is something that I'll explain. But basically, Sanity are trying to. They've come up with a standardised way of returning content to clients via their API, and I'll sort of go into that in a bit more detail. It's built with React, so I find it a lot easier to extend upon. And one thing that I did kind of stumble upon was that there's potential for a really nice localization approach for translations, etc. So, and again, I can show you that in the demo. The documentation. This is basically the section that I was referring to, like the do's and don'ts. If you go to sanity.io/docs, I think it is, that's where you get started. Now, demo time. If you can bear with me 2 minutes, then we'll see how we get on. I should have thought about this and maybe brought a platform. Hopefully I don't need a Zimmer frame by the end of this. Okay, so we can see the screen. So, current website, endeavour.digital or endeavour-digital.com, probably the worst agency website you'll ever see because it was knocked up on the train to Leeds when I used to work here. And it was just something there so that I could get some information up. There's some brief text about what we do. There's, marketing spiel about contacting. We don't particularly want to work with that. The blogging aspect of the website as well is handled through Medium, so we're taking users away from the website. I really want to put this behind a content management system so that I can deal with everything. Now at first, I fell for the idea of doing it with WordPress, but this is the new site that we have so far. Parts of it are still static because I'm not too bothered about making them completely content manageable. It's things like this section here where we put our projects, our clients, our testimonials, so that if we want a particular testimonial on the homepage, then we can just go in and switch it. And of course the blog posts. So I'll just show you what it looks like. Again, this is, to be honest, this is getting like designed on the fly. So this page here is just a really rough example that I've knocked up specifically for the talk, to be honest. So that's it, and I don't know if you've noticed already, but it seems it's pretty quick because obviously it's just rendering static content back. There's no load time between the blog when it's fetching all of the content for us because we've already got it. And that's how it would behave in production as well. Now I've got a little note just to remind me where I need to be. So the Sanity build. So what I did to get started with this was I basically took a fork of Sanity's Gatsby project, and what they do is they basically configured it to be a monorepo with Learner. So that means we have two packages. We have Studio and a web directory, and the thing that I really liked about this is that it means that when I'm working locally I can just run one start command and it's just going to simultaneously run the Studio and the website at the same time, which is awesome. In terms of the Sanity configuration, which is, yes, here, it looks a little bit like this. Now, Sanity is really heavily customizable, so this is the kind of UI that you get out of the box. What you would actually see is very little to start with, because you kind of get like an empty shell, and through configuration with JavaScript you can add content blocks and add different fields and such. But just to sort of give you some context about how we're using it, we have a site settings page, which is where we can put standard keywords in, a description, a title. We can put whatever we like in here eventually. We have a place for company info, so that we can put our contact details in for the footer. We have a people block, which is effectively like staff members or authors. But if we think back to the use case that I had earlier about associating people with a post that they might not have necessarily published, you can do that nice and easily without any carry on. Clients, it's obvious really, we have some clients, and then inside of there's some logos. We have categories, which we use against projects, our blog posts, our testimonials, and our pages. So it's quite straightforward really, there's nothing too magical going on. Now, in terms of the code, so we talked about this idea of portable text, and here we have a block content field. Now, what happens is the block content field is something like this. This is our main content editor. Now, each block is basically a property within or an object within an array rather. So what we can do inside of Sanity is we can see what our response was kind of going to look like. So you'll see here that for the body, you can see that we've got these children and they have a type. So you've got a type of span, a type of block, and that's really cool, because that means no matter what device you're on, you can just look for the type and then tell your app how it needs to render that type. So span, for example, could be a P. There could be a lot of effort involved in that, but Sanity have kindly created a couple of SDKs and some React components that we can use in our front end, which is what I've done here. I'll be able to show you that. Now, what I wanted to do was just give you like a quick example of this in action. So if we go to our article template, which is our, because we're in Gatsby world now, you'll see here that we have this block content component, and this is basically going to return the different content that we want. So raw body here is the main content from the article that we were looking at just now. Now, serializers, we'll look at them now. So in this particular post, in Sanity, you'll see that we've got a code block at the bottom, and what Sanity does is it recognises that, it recognises that type as code, and we're using a separate React module to style that up and make it look nice for us. What is really cool is that Sanity have a plugin that we can use called Code, and it gives us an interface looking something like this, so that we can choose a language that we like, and it will take care of the syntax highlighting within the editor, and then it will pass down the language type to the client side for us, and that's how I'm telling my template what syntax highlighting to use basically. And to actually achieve that, wrong file. It's just that I've literally just imported a plugin that's required that's installed from Gatsby's, that's installed from Sanity's library, and we can basically pass in as an extra type called code. Does that kind of make sense? I know I've kind of waffled on a little bit there, but basically, via the use of a plugin, within a matter of minutes, I literally was able to have a nice interface for writing code on an article. You can certainly look into that yourselves on the Sanity documents if you'd like to. The other level of customization that we have, if you see here, we currently have, let's put some content in, and we can make this a list, bulleted list, but let's assume our client wants us to actually use a number-based list. Now, what should happen here? So just like what will happen on the client side, which I can show shortly, Sanity has hot reloading built into it on the back end as well. So we've updated the config there to say that we want to be able to use lists, numbered lists, but now we have a new option here, so we can switch that to a number. And again, this is all pretty much driven through some pre-built configuration that you just need to include via the documentation. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly go through the YouTube field that I put in. So inside of our content here, let's assume that we want to insert a YouTube video. Now, what we can do is we can basically add the option of a YouTube field to this menu. And this is what it looks like in the code. So we've created a preview component, which I'll go into later, but the base of it's here. So we've given it a name of YouTube. Sanity comes with different field types, so you have object, string, array, there's quite a lot. And then you can give it a title, which is the title that appears in the Sanity editor. And then we give it some fields. So what we're going to do is we're only going to pass in a single URL. And because we've given it a type of URL, Sanity will basically take care of validation for us with the URL. And then we can give it an extra option called preview. So what happens is we're going to say, right, with this URL, we're going to return this component, which comes up to here. And this is our YouTube preview component. Now, long story short, what's going to happen, it's going to render an iframe, which is this, and we've used a separate module called getYouTubeID to acquire the ID from the URL that we pass into it. So, by bringing this back in now, if I go to youtube.com, not that one. Okay, so let's take this, come back down to our block. We can now insert the YouTube embed, pass in the URL, and you can see that how quick it is. It's already rendered the component for us, so we've got the preview. This is just going to give us some options to either edit the URL or delete them, and we should be able to play it from within the actual preview as well. So this time, when I publish this change, Sanity actually comes with hot reloading on Gatsby's end. So the whole carry on that we had with WordPress and having to stop and restart the server, that's taken care of directly through Gatsby, and oh, well, he says that. Oh no. The chances are is that I've probably missed something in the config, but if I make some changes here, no, the demo gods have let me down. Sam saw it when we were working on it together.
It works, definitely.
Promise you it worked. Bloody typical. So, I was leaving that till last because that was going to be the thing. Yeah, basically, it gives you hot reloading. So without stopping and starting servers, you can basically see your changes as you make them. For whatever reason, maybe because I've forgotten to bring something back in, it's not quite doing. So I hope no one from Sanity is watching the stream, because then I've completely just let them down. But yeah, that's essentially it. So sorry that I've kind of undersold it a little bit there. but do check Sanity out. It's a great alternative to the likes of WordPress, Contentful, and all of the other ones that we have out there. It's really good for for us as developers to get things up and running really quickly. What I'm thinking of doing with this particular setup is making it generic, so that if people come along and they say like, oh, we need a website with a very similar structure to what we're going to use for Endeavour, we can just fork that and we have something up and running really straightforward. And what we can actually do with Sanity as well, remember it's just a React application that's talking to an endpoint on Sanity's end, which means that you can host Sanity itself on something like Netlify, so the actual hosting side of it's quite straightforward as well. Sanity does give you the option to host the studio through their own CDN, but for this particular example we've just put it on WordPress. So yeah, thanks very much. Just give us a shout if you've got any questions at the end.